Imagine stumbling upon a pile of gold hidden in the dusty corners of an abandoned house. It sounds like a fairy tale come true, right? That's precisely what happened to Richard Megan, a 52-year-old man who had called the streets his home for over a decade, scavenging for scraps to stay alive. On that chilly autumn evening, Richard was exploring an old, forgotten property on the edge of town, hoping to find shelter from the coming rain, when he spotted something gleaming under a loose floorboard. It was a stash of gold coins and bars, worth a fortune. With that treasure, Richard could turn his life around, get a place to live, proper meals, maybe even mend his broken past. But what this weathered, kind-hearted soul did with the gold shocked the entire community and inspired countless others. If this tale is stirring something in you, drop a comment with your town's name. Give it a thumbs up to celebrate goodness in the world, and subscribe with notifications on for more uplifting stories. Richard Megan was no stranger to the harsh realities of life on the margins. At 52 years old, he had spent the last 11 years navigating the unforgiving world of homelessness, a far cry from the stable existence he once knew. His face told the story of those years, etched with deep lines carved by relentless wind, biting cold, and the constant weight of worry. His skin was rough and weathered, like leather left too long in the sun, and his hair, a tangled mass of gray, fell unkempt around his shoulders. A scraggly beard covered his chin, patchy in places from irregular grooming, and his clothes were little more than rags, patched together from discarded fabrics he had found in dumpsters or thrift store rejects. His shoes, thin-soled and worn through at the heels, offered scant protection against the pavement's bite. Yet beneath this exterior lay a man of quiet dignity, someone who had once built a life filled with purpose and love. Before the streets claimed him, Richard had been a skilled mechanic, working long hours in a bustling garage where the hum of engines and the clang of tools formed the soundtrack of his days. He had a family then, a wife named Elena whose laughter could light up the darkest room, and two daughters, Lily and Sophia, who were the center of his world. Lily, the elder at 14 when everything fell apart, had her mother's bright eyes and a passion for drawing that filled their home with colorful sketches. Sophia, just 12, shared Richard's mechanical curiosity, often joining him in the garage to tinker with small projects. Their life together was simple but content, marked by weekend barbecues in the backyard and evening walks along the neighborhood paths. Elena had been the glue holding it all together, her warmth and resilience making even the toughest days bearable. Tragedy struck without warning. Elena fell ill suddenly, a rare and aggressive disease that ravaged her body in a matter of months. The doctors did everything they could, but the treatments were expensive, piling up medical bills that dwarfed Richard's modest income. He worked overtime, borrowed from friends, and even sold their car to cover the costs, but it was never enough. Elena fought valiantly, her spirit unbroken even as her strength faded, but in the end, she slipped away one quiet night in the hospital, leaving Richard shattered and alone with their girls. The grief was overwhelming, a void that no words could fill. Relatives stepped in during those dark days, but not with the compassion Richard needed. Instead, they blamed him for the financial ruin, accusing him of poor decisions that had led to the debt. In their eyes, he was unfit to raise the girls alone, and they petitioned for custody, taking Lily and Sophia away to live with an aunt in a distant city. The loss was a double blow, ripping away the last remnants of his family. Devastated and isolated, Richard turned to alcohol as a crutch, seeking numbness in bottles that promised temporary escape. It started with a drink after work to dull the pain, but soon it consumed him, leading to missed shifts and arguments with his boss. He lost his job, then the house, as the bills mounted and eviction notices arrived. The streets became his reluctant refuge, a world of makeshift shelters under bridges and in alleyways, where survival meant scavenging for food and dodging the dangers of the night. He tried to pull himself together more than once, attending support meetings and applying for jobs, but the grip of addiction proved too strong, pulling him back each time. Through it all, though, Richard held on to a core of integrity and compassion that set him apart. He never stole, even when hunger gnawed at his stomach, and he often shared what little he had with others in similar straits, a can of soup here or a warm blanket there. His kindness was a quiet rebellion against the cruelty of his circumstances, a reminder that goodness could endure even in the shadows. It was on a crisp Wednesday in October that fate intervened in the most unexpected way. The air carried the sharp tang of falling leaves, and the ground crunched underfoot with the first hints of frost. Richard awoke that morning beneath the familiar arch of a highway bridge, his breath visible in the chill as he packed his few belongings into a tattered backpack. The city was stirring to life around him, cars rumbling overhead and distant horns signaling the start of another day. Hunger urged him onward, but so did the promise of rain clouds gathering on the horizon. He decided to venture to the outskirts of town, where abandoned properties sometimes offered temporary shelter away from the prying eyes of authorities and the chaos of urban streets. As he walked, the landscape shifted from concrete jungles to overgrown lots dotted with forgotten structures. His eyes scanned for possibilities, and soon they landed on an old Victorian house standing sentinel at the edge of a wooded area. The place had a reputation among the homeless community, whispered tales of it being haunted or cursed, but Richard dismissed such superstitions. Up close, the house looked every bit the relic of better times, paint peeling in long strips from weathered boards, windows shattered and gaping like empty sockets, and a sagging porch that creaked under the slightest breeze. Vines climbed the walls like possessive fingers, and the roof bore holes where shingles had long since surrendered to the elements. It was the kind of place that invited caution, but desperation made Richard bold. He approached the front door, his heart pounding with a mix of anticipation and unease. The knob turned with a rusty groan, and he pushed inside, the hinges protesting loudly in the still air. Dust motes danced in the faint light filtering through cracked panes, and the musty scent of decay filled his nostrils. Shadows played tricks in the corners, stretching long and ominous across the faded wallpaper. Richard paused, listening for any signs of life, intruders or animals that might have claimed the space. Hearing nothing but the distant howl of wind through broken glass, he proceeded, his scavenged flashlight cutting a narrow beam through the gloom. The floorboards groaned under his weight, each step a potential betrayal of weakness in the structure. He moved through the entryway into what must have once been a parlor, now littered with debris, overturned furniture, scattered papers yellowed with age, and remnants of lives long gone. His exploration took him deeper, room by room, the suspense building with every creak and whisper of settling wood. In one upstairs bedroom, he thought he heard footsteps echoing from below, but chalked it up to the house's age or perhaps a rodent scurrying in the walls. Heart racing, he continued, driven by the need for a dry corner to rest. It was in the back room, a space that might have served as a study, where his foot hit a soft spot in the floor. The board gave slightly, not rotten but loose, as if it had been disturbed before. Curiosity piqued, Richard knelt down, his fingers prying at the edges. With a bit of effort, the plank lifted, revealing a hidden compartment beneath. There, nestled in the dust, was a canvas bag, heavy and tied with frayed rope. Trembling slightly, he pulled it out, the fabric rough against his calloused hands. Untying the knot, he peered inside, and his breath caught in his throat. Gold coins and bars gleamed back at him, their surfaces catching the flashlight's beam in an eerie, otherworldly shine. There were dozens of them, stamped with markings he vaguely recognized from old history books, perhaps from a bygone era of prospectors or collectors. His mind raced to estimate their value, hundreds of thousands of dollars at least, maybe more if they were rare. Visions flooded his thoughts, a warm apartment with a bed of his own, hot meals every day, clothes that fit properly. He could reach out to Lily and Sophia, mend the bridges burned by years of absence, perhaps even seek treatment for his demons. Tears welled in his eyes as he clutched the bag, joy mingling with disbelief. This was a miracle, a second chance dropped into his lap. But as the initial rush faded, doubt crept in like shadows lengthening at dusk. Where had this gold come from? Was it the spoils of a heist, hidden away by criminals who might return? Or perhaps an forgotten inheritance, meant for someone else? The potential dangers loomed large. If word got out, he could become a target, pursued by those with darker intentions. And then there was the moral quandary, a voice in his head whispering about right and wrong. Keeping it felt like theft, even if no owner was apparent, while turning it in might mean losing it all. Overwhelmed, Richard decided to stay hidden in the house for the night, tucking the bag into a corner and barricading the door with a broken chair. As darkness fell, his mind raced between temptation and honesty. The house seemed to come alive in the night, with unexplained thumps echoing from upstairs, perhaps branches against the roof, or something more sinister. Paranoia built, every rustle amplifying his fears that he was not alone. He paced the room, replaying his life's regrets, wondering if this find was a test of his remaining character. Hours stretched into an eternity, the cold seeping through the walls and into his bones. By dawn, as the first light pierced the gloom, resolve hardened in him. He would seek out the authorities, report the find, and let fate decide the rest. Gathering the bag, he slipped out carefully, the house's secrets left behind as he stepped into the uncertain morning. As darkness enveloped the old Victorian house, Richard settled into his makeshift vigil, the canvas bag clutched tightly against his chest like a fragile secret. The initial euphoria of the discovery had faded, replaced by a gnawing uncertainty that kept sleep at bay. He paced the dimly lit room, his flashlight beams slicing through the gloom, revealing cobwebs dangling from the ceiling and layers of dust that muffled his footsteps. To ensure his safety, he decided to explore further, venturing beyond the study where he had found the gold. The house held an eerie silence, broken only by occasional creaks that set his nerves on edge, but he pushed forward, driven by the need to secure his hiding spot. Moving cautiously into the adjoining hallway, Richard's mind drifted back to brighter days, the memories surfacing like ghosts in the quiet. He recalled the warmth of his family home, a modest bungalow on the edge of town where evenings were filled with the aroma of Elena's cooking. One particular night stood out, a Friday after a long week at the garage. He had come home grease-stained and weary, only to be greeted by the sound of laughter from the kitchen. Elena stood at the stove, stirring a pot of her famous chili, her apron dusted with flour from the cornbread baking in the oven. Lily and Sophia were at the table, their schoolbooks pushed aside as they helped set plates. "Daddy's home," Sophia had shouted, rushing to hug him, her small hands wrapping around his legs. That night, they had eaten together, sharing stories of the day. Richard told tales of quirky car repairs, making the girls giggle with exaggerated impressions of frustrated customers. Elena's eyes sparkled as she watched, her hand occasionally brushing his under the table, a silent affirmation of their bond. Those moments extended beyond dinners. On weekends, Richard would take the girls to the garage, teaching them the basics of mechanics. Lily, with her artistic flair, preferred sketching the tools, but Sophia dove in eagerly, her tiny fingers gripping a wrench as he showed her how to fix a bicycle chain. "See, Soph, it's all about patience and the right turn," he would say, guiding her hands. Their laughter echoed through the space, mingling with the clang of metal. Elena often joined them, bringing lemonade and sandwiches, turning the lesson into a family picnic. Life felt unbreakable then, a tapestry of simple joys woven with love and stability. But the threads began to unravel with Elena's illness. It started subtly, a persistent cough she dismissed as a seasonal bug. When it worsened, they visited the doctor, expecting antibiotics or rest. Instead, the diagnosis hit like a thunderbolt, a rare form of cancer, aggressive and unforgiving. Richard remembered the sterile office, the doctor's grave expression as he explained the prognosis. "We'll need to start treatment immediately," the physician said, outlining chemotherapy and radiation. Elena squeezed Richard's hand, her face pale but determined. "We'll fight this together," she whispered. The hospital visits became routine, each one chipping away at their savings. Without comprehensive insurance, the bills mounted rapidly, co-pays for medications alone running into hundreds of dollars per month. Richard worked extra shifts, but the costs for scans, consultations, and hospital stays outpaced his earnings. Elena's condition deteriorated, her once vibrant energy fading, yet she remained the pillar, comforting the girls with stories and hugs even from her bed. The relatives' involvement turned bitter during those final weeks. Elena's sister, Margaret, arrived unannounced one evening, her face set in disapproval. "How could you let this happen, Richard? The bills are piling up and you're barely keeping the house," she accused in the living room, her voice sharp. Richard, exhausted from a night shift, tried to explain. "We're doing everything we can. The insurance doesn't cover it all." But Margaret pressed on, rallying other family members. "The girls need stability. If you can't provide it, we will." Dialogues like these echoed in his memory, heated exchanges where blame overshadowed grief. After Elena's passing, the funeral was a blur of condolences and whispers. Richard stood graveside, Lily and Sophia clinging to him, their tears soaking his shirt. That night, alone in the empty house, he poured his first drink in years, a glass of whiskey to numb the ache. It was meant to be one, but it became a habit, a crutch during sleepless nights. Back in the present, Richard entered what appeared to be the kitchen, his flashlight illuminating cracked tiles and rusted appliances. He rifled through cabinets, finding nothing but empty cans and faded newspapers scattered on the counter. One headline caught his eye, yellowed with age. "Daring bank heist leaves town in shock. Suspects vanish with gold reserves." The date was from over 20 years ago, detailing a robbery where masked men had escaped with coins and bars, never to be caught. Richard's pulse quickened. Could this be the source of his find? The article mentioned the suspects using abandoned properties as hideouts, and suddenly the house's isolation made sense. Owners had fled amid rumors of criminal ties, leaving the place to rot, untouched by authorities who deemed it insignificant. He pocketed the paper, a clue that amplified his paranoia. His descent after the funeral had been swift. The alcohol led to mistakes at work, a botched repair on a customer's engine that cost the garage a client. "You're slipping, Rich," his boss had said, giving him a warning. But the warnings piled up, and soon the pink slip arrived. Eviction followed, the landlord pounding on the door with notices. "You have a week," the man barked, unmoved by Richard's pleas. The girls' goodbye was the hardest. Margaret came to collect them, Sophia sobbing as she hugged him. "Why can't we stay, Daddy?" she asked, her voice breaking. Lily, more reserved, whispered, "We love you," before they drove away. Richard watched the car disappear, the bottle his only companion that night. On the streets, survival became a daily ritual. He learned the routes for soup kitchens, the safe spots under bridges where the wind was less harsh. Friendships formed in unlikely places, like with old Tom, a veteran who shared his blanket during a rainstorm. "Here, take half my sandwich," Richard would say on days he scavenged extra, their conversations a lifeline amid isolation. He attempted rehab twice, checking into a local program the first time with hope. Group sessions peeled back layers of grief, but withdrawal's grip pulled him back. The second try ended similarly, a relapse triggered by a chance sighting of a family resembling his own. Yet, through the haze, his parents' lessons lingered, voices from childhood emphasizing honesty. "Son, integrity is all you truly own," his father had said, teaching him to return a lost wallet as a boy. His mother echoed it. "Do right, even when no one's watching." These words warred with temptation now, as he guarded the gold. Returning to the study, Richard noticed fresh footprints in the dust near the window, not his own. Fear surged. Had squatters used this place recently? He barricaded the door with a heavy dresser, its scrape echoing through the house. Shadows danced on the walls from moonlight filtering in, suggesting movement in the periphery. A loud creak from upstairs made him freeze, imagining footsteps of returning robbers or ghosts of the past. He sat against the wall, the bag at his feet, his internal monologue a storm. Keeping the gold could rebuild his life, by sobriety, reunite with his daughters. But it felt wrong, a betrayal of the man he once was. Hours passed in this tension, memories flooding in waves. Elena's final words, "Be strong for them," the girls' faces, his parents' guidance. As dawn approached, the house grew quieter, the night's terrors receding. Richard's resolve solidified, the weight of his upbringing tipping the scale toward honesty. He gathered the bag, its heaviness a reminder of the burden he carried. Slipping out the back door, he moved through the overgrown yard, evading imagined pursuers in the misty morning light. Branches snapped underfoot, each sound heightening his alertness, but no one followed. The town lay ahead, a new chapter waiting, shaped by the shadows he had confronted. With the town beckoning in the distance, Richard paused at the edge of the overgrown yard, his breath coming in shallow bursts. The misty morning light filtered through the trees, casting long shadows that mirrored the turmoil still churning within him. Though his resolve had begun to form as dawn neared, the night had been a battlefield of the soul, one he could not yet fully shake. The hours spent in the house had tested him in ways he had not anticipated, blending internal strife with unexpected perils that sharpened his decision. As he stood there, the weight of the bag pulling at his shoulder, memories of that interminable night replayed vividly, each moment a step toward the man he hoped to become. Back in the dim confines of the study, as the clock ticked toward midnight, Richard had hunkered down against the wall, the canvas bag a constant presence at his side. The initial thrill of discovery had long since ebbed, replaced by a profound dilemma that gnawed at his conscience. Visions of a transformed life danced tantalizingly in his mind, so real he could almost touch them. He imagined renting a small apartment in a quiet neighborhood, nothing extravagant, but with essentials he had long forgotten: a sturdy door that locked, a kitchenette with a functioning stove for brewing coffee in the mornings, and a bed with clean sheets that did not carry the damp chill of the outdoors. There would be a window overlooking a park, perhaps, where he could watch children play and remember his own daughters. Sobriety treatment would follow, structured steps he had researched during fleeting visits to public libraries. First, detox at a local clinic to purge the alcohol from his system, then group therapy sessions where he could share his story without judgment, building toward a sponsor and daily meetings to maintain his path. With stability, he could track down Lily and Sophia using old addresses from family letters he had kept in his backpack, perhaps sending a careful note through a mutual acquaintance to explain his absence and beg for a chance to reconnect. The gold could fund it all, a bridge to redemption. Yet these dreams clashed violently with the voice of his conscience, a steadfast guardian shaped by years of hardship and innate decency. The gold's gleam felt tainted now, its likely criminal origins impossible to ignore. From street rumors whispered around campfires and in shelters, Richard recalled tales of that old bank heist 2 decades ago, the one detailed in the newspaper he had found. Thieves had vanished with the haul, speculated to have buried it in forgotten spots like this house, evading capture but leaving a trail of violence in their wake. What if claimants were still out there, dangerous men who tracked whispers of unearthed treasure? Keeping it might invite peril, turning him into a marked man dodging shadows far worse than homelessness. His parents' teachings echoed louder in the silence, lessons of honesty drilled into him as a child through simple acts like returning change overpaid at a store. Wealth without honor is dust, his father had often said, and now that dust threatened to bury him. The moral cost loomed largest. Claiming the gold as his own would erode the last shreds of his integrity, making him no better than the opportunists he had avoided on the streets. He wrestled with these thoughts, the bag's weight a physical manifestation of the temptation pulling him one way while his soul tugged the other. The internal storm intensified when external threats shattered the solitude. Around midnight, a distant thud echoed from the front of the house, not the settling creaks he had dismissed earlier, but something deliberate, like a door being forced. Richard's heart leaped into his throat. He extinguished his flashlight and pressed himself into the corner, ears straining. Footsteps followed, muffled but unmistakable, accompanied by low voices murmuring in the entryway. "Check the upstairs first," one grunted, his tone rough and impatient. "Heard this place has hidden spots." They were other scavengers, likely drawn by the same rumors that had led Richard here, men hardened by the streets, but with fewer scruples. Panic surged through him as he realized he was trapped, the barricaded door his only defense, but one that might not hold. Quietly, he slipped the bag under a loose pile of debris in the corner, covering it with dusty cloths, then crept toward the doorway to listen. The intruders split up, their boots thudding against the floorboards as they rummaged through rooms. Richard's mind raced for an escape, but bolting now would alert them. Instead, he moved stealthily into the adjacent hallway, using the shadows as cover. A beam of light from one scavenger's lantern swept the parlor, narrowly missing him as he ducked behind an overturned cabinet. His breath held. He navigated the dark corridors, the house's layout now a labyrinth of peril. Crumbling floors added to the tension. In one room, a board gave way under his foot with a sharp crack, forcing him to freeze as voices called out. What was that? He pressed on, heart pounding, slipping into a narrow closet just as footsteps approached. The chase unfolded in hushed intensity, a game of hide-and-seek where discovery meant confrontation or worse. One intruder, a burly figure with a scarred face visible in the flickering light, entered the study where Richard had been. Nothing here but junk, he muttered, kicking at the debris, but missing the hidden bag. Richard, peering through a crack in the closet door across the hall, weighed his options. As the man turned to leave, another sound drew him back, and Richard seized the moment to shift positions, darting to the kitchen. There, a rotting section of floor nearly betrayed him again, sagging dangerously as he crossed, but he caught himself on a counter, the wood splintering softly. Flashlight beams crisscrossed the halls, coming perilously close. Once, a ray grazed his shoe as he flattened against a wall, the intruder pausing mere feet away before moving on. The tension peaked when Richard, cornered in an upstairs bedroom, heard one ascending the stairs. With no other exit, he prepared for the inevitable. The door creaked open, and the scavenger entered, a lanky man with weary eyes that scanned the room. Their gazes locked, and for a frozen second, violence hung in the air. But Richard raised his hands slowly, his voice steady despite the fear. I'm not here to fight. Just seeking shelter, like you. The man hesitated, lantern lowering slightly. In that brief confrontation, Richard shared fragments of his backstory, his words a bridge to de-escalate. Lost my wife to illness, my girls to family blame, ended up out here. This place, it's got stories, but I'm no threat. The scavenger nodded, his own hardness softening momentarily. Heard rumors about this house. Cursed treasure from that old robbery brings bad luck to whoever takes it. We've searched before, found nothing but ghosts. He revealed tales passed among the homeless, previous finders plagued by misfortune, accidents, or pursuits that ended badly. Best leave it be, he advised, before calling to his companion. Empty again. Let's go. The intruders departed empty-handed, their footsteps fading into the night, leaving Richard alone once more. The encounter crystallized his path. The rumors of a curse felt like a sign, reinforcing that true wealth lay in character, not gold. His character growth unfolded in that aftermath, a quiet affirmation of honesty over desperation. The temptation, once a roaring fire, dimmed to embers, extinguished by the realization that reclaiming his life meant starting clean, not stained by ill-gotten gains. He retrieved the bag, its contents now a responsibility rather than a prize, and waited out the remaining hours, his mind clearer. As morning light pierced the windows, Richard escaped undetected, slipping through the back door into the misty yard. Branches snapped underfoot, but the sounds were his alone, no pursuers real or imagined on his trail. He trudged toward the town, the bag heavy on his shoulder, his heart pounding from the night's adrenaline. Each step carried him closer to the police station, a symbol of turning point. Motivations clear now, he saw this act not as loss but as liberation, honoring Elena's memory by being the father his daughters deserved, upholding the integrity that had sustained him through the streets. The community would soon learn of his choice, but for Richard, the true reward was the peace settling within, a foundation for genuine change. As the morning sun climbed higher, dispelling the mist that clung to the outskirts, Richard made his way into the heart of the town, each step a deliberate affirmation of his choice. The police station loomed ahead, a squat brick building with faded blue trim, its parking lot dotted with patrol cars that gleamed under the light. His heart still raced from the night's ordeals, but the peace he had found in those final hours propelled him forward, a quiet strength amid the uncertainty. He adjusted the strap of the canvas bag on his shoulder, feeling its bulk as both a burden and a beacon, and pushed through the glass doors into the fluorescent-lit lobby. The desk officer, a middle-aged woman with sharp eyes and a uniform that spoke of long shifts, looked up from her paperwork. Her gaze narrowed at the sight of him, taking in his ragged appearance, the tangled hair, and the dirt-streaked clothes that marked him as one of the town's unseen. "Can I help you?" she asked, her tone laced with professional skepticism, the kind honed from dealing with countless stories that bent the truth. Richard swallowed, his voice steady but soft. "I found something. Something valuable. I think it belongs to someone else, and I want to turn it in." She leaned forward slightly, her pen pausing midair. "Found something? Like what?" "We get a lot of found items that turn out to be misunderstandings." Her words carried an undercurrent of doubt, as if sizing him up for ulterior motives. "It's gold," Richard replied, lowering his voice instinctively. "Coins and bars, a whole bag of them. I came across it in an old abandoned house on the edge of town." The officer's eyebrows shot up, and she set her pen down with a click. "Gold? You serious? Sit down over there. Don't move." She gestured to a row of plastic chairs against the wall, her hand already reaching for the phone. As Richard complied, sinking into the seat with the bag at his feet, he overheard her murmured conversation. "Yeah, got a walk-in claiming he found gold. Looks homeless. Might be a crank, but send someone down." The wait was brief, but in those moments, Richard's mind flickered with second thoughts, wondering if this was the right path or if he had walked into a trap of his own making. Two officers emerged from a side door, one burly with a mustache that twitched in curiosity, the other younger and more alert, his hand resting casually near his belt. "You the one with a find?" the burly one asked, approaching with measured steps. Richard nodded, standing slowly. "Yes, sir. Here it is." He lifted the bag onto the counter, the canvas thudding softly. The officers exchanged glances before unzipping it, their expressions shifting from routine indifference to wide-eyed astonishment as the gold spilled into view, catching the overhead lights in a dazzling array. "Holy, that's real gold," the younger officer muttered, picking up a coin to examine its weight and markings. "Where do you say you found this?" "In an old Victorian house, about 2 miles out on Elm Road," Richard explained, providing the coordinates as best he could from memory. The overgrown path, the wooded lot at latitude roughly 42.3 degrees north, longitude 71.5 west, details he had noted from faded signs during his treks. "It was under a loose floorboard in the back room. I didn't take anything else, just brought it straight here." The burly officer nodded, but his eyes remained guarded. "All right, come with us. We'll need a full statement." They led him to an interrogation room, a stark space with a metal table, chairs, and a one-way mirror that reflected his weary face back at him. As they settled in, the questioning began in earnest, a barrage of details to piece together his story. "Start from the beginning," the younger one said, notebook ready. "What were you doing out there? How'd you get inside?" Richard recounted the events methodically, from waking under the bridge to spotting the house, the creaking entry, the suspenseful exploration, and the moment his foot hit the soft board. He described the bag's contents without exaggeration, emphasizing his overnight vigil and the decision at dawn. The officers inspected the gold further, weighing pieces on a small scale they brought in, noting serial numbers on the bars that hinted at age and origin. "This looks antique," the burly one observed. "Could be worth a fortune. You sure you didn't know about it before?" "I swear it was pure chance," Richard insisted, his voice firm. The session stretched on, their questions probing for inconsistencies, circling back to his background. He shared enough to contextualize without delving too deep, mentioning his years on the streets, but omitting the raw pain of his losses. Emotions swirled within him, a mix of relief at unburdening himself and anxiety over their scrutiny. What if they didn't believe him? The gold's value made everything suspect, and he felt the weight of his appearance working against him. After the initial recounting, they left him alone in the room, the door clicking shut with finality. Hours ticked by, building a tension that coiled in his chest. He paced the small space, the fluorescent buzz overhead amplifying his isolation. Through the walls, muffled voices filtered in. Phone calls to verify the house's location, discussions about running prints on the bag. One snippet caught his ear, an officer saying, "Matches the description from that old heist file." "Yeah, the '05 bank job. Pull the records." Richard's pulse quickened. The newspaper clue from the house aligned with this, confirming his suspicions but heightening his fear. Was he entangled in something bigger? Finally, the door opened to admit the station chief, a stern man in his late 50s with a badge that read, Chief Harlan, and eyes that had seen too many deceptions. He carried a thick folder, settling across from Richard with a sigh. "Mr. Megan, we've done some digging. That gold? It's from a bank heist 20 years ago. Small-town branch hit by a crew of 3. They made off with the vault's reserves, mostly coins and bars like these, valued at over $500,000 back then. One thief died in a shootout during the getaway, the other 2 were caught months later, sentenced to long terms. They're still behind bars, rotting in federal prison. The loot was never recovered. Trial focused on the violence, and the hideout leads went cold due to overlooked evidence, misplaced reports during the investigation shuffle. Your find closes that chapter." Richard absorbed the revelation, the pieces falling into place, without gaps. The house had been a forgotten bolt hole, abandoned after the heist's fallout. "I had no idea," he said quietly. "Just stumbled on it." Chief Harlan leaned back, his expression softening. "Most in your position would have kept it. Hell, plenty of upstanding folks would. Your honesty? It's commendable. Rare these days." Praise followed, the chief recounting similar cases where finders vanished with the goods, only to face consequences later. But the thrill of the moment twisted when Harlan added, "Still, we need to verify everything. You'll have to stay put a bit longer. Protocol for high-value recoveries." The words hit like a cold wave. Initial doubt from the desk officer resurfaced in procedural form, leading to a brief detention in a holding cell down the hall. Richard's mind raced into overdrive, fearing a frame-up or misunderstanding. Bars clanged shut, and in the dim light, he sat on the hard bench, emotions crashing, regret for not walking away, terror that his past alcoholism or street life would paint him as complicit. What if they twisted his story, saw him as an accomplice resurfacing? The hours dragged, each minute a test of his newfound resolve, but he clung to the truth, whispering reminders of his integrity like a mantra. Resolution came mid-afternoon when the door unlocked, Chief Harlan returning with a nod. "You're clear. Prints on the bag don't match yours beyond surface handling, and your story checks out. No priors linking you to the heist. We've confirmed the house was empty per our sweep team." Relief flooded Richard, washing away the fear, leaving a profound sense of validation. His emotions peaked in that release, a catharsis that foreshadowed greater things, perhaps rewards from the bank or community recognition that could aid his rebuilding. As they processed the paperwork, Harlan mentioned offhand, words already leaking. "Media loves a good Samaritan story." Freed at last, Richard stepped out into the late afternoon sun, the station behind him. His legs felt lighter, unburdened by more than just the bag. But as he walked toward a nearby bench to gather his thoughts, a young woman approached, notebook in hand and a press badge dangling from her neck. "Excuse me, are you Richard Megan? I'm from the local Gazette. Heard about the gold. Care to share your side?" The contact marked the beginning of a whirlwind, his story poised to spread, carrying with it the seeds of transformation he had only dared to imagine. The reporter's approach caught Richard off guard, her eager smile contrasting the exhaustion etched into his features. He hesitated, glancing back at the station doors as if seeking an escape, but the weight of the moment held him in place. I don't know if I'm ready for this, he admitted quietly, his voice carrying the gravel of a man and used to attention. Yet, as she persisted with gentle questions, he found himself opening up, sharing the bare bones of his discovery and choice. The interview was brief, conducted right there on the sidewalk, but it ignited a spark that would soon erupt into a full-blown media frenzy. By evening, the local gazette had published the story online, the headline blaring, "Homeless hero turns in $500,000 gold stash from decades-old heist." The article painted Richard as an unlikely beacon of virtue, detailing his find in the abandoned house and his decision to report it despite his dire circumstances. Other outlets picked it up quickly, the tales spreading like wildfire across regional news sites. Man of integrity, scavenger returns lost fortune, proclaimed one major daily, while a television station ran a segment with dramatic reenactments of the discovery, complete with shadowy footage of the Victorian house. Interviews followed in rapid succession, reporters converging on the shelter where Richard had sought refuge that night. He faced cameras with humility, his responses measured and sincere. "I just did what felt right," he told a network affiliate, his eyes downcast.
"That gold was mine.
Keeping it would have eaten at me." When pressed about his homelessness, he shared sparingly, emphasizing lessons from his parents rather than dwelling on personal losses. "Honesty's the one thing nobody can take from you," he said in one clip that went viral, his weathered face conveying quiet conviction. Social media amplified the story exponentially, turning Richard into an overnight sensation. Posts flooded platforms, with users sharing the Gazette article alongside hashtags like #HomelessHero and #HonestyWins. Influencers weighed in, one popular podcaster declaring, "In a world full of scams, this guy's a reminder that good people exist." Shares numbered in the tens of thousands within hours, comments pouring in from across the country, "Restored my faith in humanity," and "What a legend. Hope he gets rewarded." Memes emerged, superimposing Richard's image, snapped from a news photo, onto inspirational backgrounds, his story inspiring threads of personal anecdotes about acts of kindness. The virality brought a mix of warmth and overwhelm. Strangers messaged him offers of help, while others debated his motives in online forums. Richard, unaccustomed to technology, learned of it through a shelter volunteer's phone, his reaction a blend of awe and discomfort. "All this fuss over doing the decent thing," he murmured, shaking his head. Amid the glow of positive attention, darker echoes began to surface, remnants of the heist's long shadow stirring into motion. Unbeknownst to Richard at first, the media coverage reached unintended ears, descendants of the original thieves. One of the imprisoned robbers, now elderly and released on parole after serving his sentence, caught wind through a family visit where the story played on the prison common room TV. His son, a rough-edged mechanic named Victor, harbored old grudges, viewing the gold as a lost family legacy rather than stolen goods. Joined by a cousin, they saw the publicity as an opportunity, albeit a risky one, to reclaim what they believed was theirs. Subtle threats materialized soon after, calculated to intimidate without drawing immediate alarm. It started with an anonymous note slipped under the shelter door 2 days after the story broke. Richard found it while collecting his meager belongings, the paper crumpled and unsigned. "That gold belongs to those who earned it. Hand it over quiet or watch your back." His stomach knotted as he read it, the words evoking the paranoia of that night in the house. He dismissed it initially as a prank, the media storm inviting all sorts of oddities, but unease lingered. Then came the shadowed followers, figures he noticed trailing him during his daily walks to the soup kitchen. One evening, as dusk fell, a man in a hooded jacket lingered across the street, his gaze fixed too intently. Richard quickened his pace, heart racing, only to spot the same silhouette the next day near a park bench where he rested. Whispers reached him through street acquaintances. "Heard some folks asking about you, saying you took what's not yours." The threats escalated subtly, a phone call to the shelter from a blocked number, a gravelly voice warning. Accidents happen to heroes who meddle. Victor and his cousin, operating from a rundown garage on the city's fringes, orchestrated these from afar. Using intermediaries to avoid direct links, their aim to scare Richard into surrendering the gold before authorities auctioned it for restitution. Richard's vigilance sharpened with each incident, the thrill of danger rekindling the adrenaline from his night in the house. He confided in a shelter worker, who urged him to report it. Returning to the police station felt surreal, the same desk officer greeting him with recognition. "Back so soon, Mr. Megan?" she asked, her skepticism softened by familiarity. He laid out the details, the note, preserved in his pocket, descriptions of the followers, the ominous call. Chief Harlan took charge personally, his team launching an investigation with efficiency. They traced the note's paper to a local print shop, security footage revealing Victor's cousin purchasing supplies. Phone records linked the blocked call to a burner device bought at a nearby store, where the buyer matched Victor's description. Surveillance expanded, officers tailing the suspects discreetly. Within a week, arrests followed during a sting operation. Victor and his cousin were caught attempting to deliver another threat, a package left at the shelter containing a symbolic broken lock and a demand note. Charged with harassment and attempted extortion, they confessed under interrogation, revealing their familial ties to the heist. "Thought it was our inheritance," Victor grumbled, but evidence of their planning sealed their fate, leading to swift convictions and short prison terms, neutralizing the threat completely. Through it all, Richard grappled with overwhelm, the media glare and lurking dangers amplifying his sense of vulnerability. Nights at the shelter grew restless, his mind replaying the followers' stares, questioning if more shadows waited. Yet his integrity shone brighter in the face of adversity, refusing offers from tabloids for sensationalized exclusives and instead using interviews to advocate for the homeless. "Folks like me, we just need a fair shot," he told one reporter, his humility endearing him further to the public. Community support blossomed amid the chaos, a grassroots response that provided a counterbalance. A local activist, inspired by the story, launched a crowdfunding campaign titled Help for the Hero, aiming to fund housing and recovery for Richard. Initial donations trickled in, small amounts from everyday people, $20 from a teacher who admired his honesty, $50 from a family touched by similar losses. The page gained traction through social shares, amassing thousands in days, with messages of encouragement flooding the comments. Businesses chipped in too, a real estate firm offering discounted rent on an apartment, a clinic providing free counseling sessions. Richard viewed it all with cautious gratitude, overwhelmed by the generosity, but grounded in his values. "I didn't do it for rewards," he confided to the shelter volunteer, "but maybe this is life's way of balancing the scales." With the threats resolved, the chapter of danger closed definitively, arrests wrapping up loose ends from the heist's legacy. Victor and his cousin's imprisonment ensured no further reprisals, police confirming no other relatives posed risks. This resolution paved the way for positive changes, the media storm shifting from frenzy to feel-good updates. Richard's story evolved into one of triumph, foreshadowing his steps toward stability. Viewing potential apartments, attending his first therapy session funded by donations. As the echoes of danger faded, a new dawn emerged, one where integrity not only endured but flourished, drawing a community together in unexpected ways. As the echoes of danger faded, a new dawn emerged, one where integrity not only endured but flourished, drawing a community together in unexpected ways. The crowdfunding campaign, initially a modest effort by a local activist, transformed into a tidal wave of generosity that swept through the town and beyond. What began with scattered donations soon surged, the online platform, a popular site called Give Forward, facilitating the influx with its user-friendly interface and viral sharing features. Users could contribute via credit card, PayPal, or even cryptocurrency, with real-time updates displaying the growing total on a progress bar themed around building bridges for Richard. Perks for donors included virtual thank-you notes and shout-outs on the campaign's social media feed, encouraging shares that amplified reach. Corporate matches doubled contributions from employees, and influencers with large followings hosted live streams, recounting Richard's story to audiences numbering in the hundreds of thousands. Within weeks, the fund exceeded the estimated value of the gold stash, over $500,000, climbing to nearly $700,000 through a combination of small grassroots gifts and larger pledges from philanthropists moved by the narrative. The mechanics were seamless. Automated emails confirmed donations, tax receipts were issued instantly, and transparent breakdowns showed allocations for housing, medical care, and daily needs, building trust that fueled further giving. Richard watched this unfold from the shelter's common room computer, guided by the same volunteer who had shown him the initial buzz. "Look at this," the young man said, pointing to the screen where the total ticked upward in real time. "People believe in you." Richard's eyes widened, a humble smile breaking through. "It's too much. I never asked for any of this." His words carried genuine bewilderment, a man accustomed to scraps now facing abundance. Yet the donations represented more than money. They were votes of confidence, affirmations that his choice resonated deeply. Amid this outpouring, opportunities materialized, starting with a job offer that felt like a full-circle return to his roots. A local garage owner, Tom Hendricks, had followed the story in the papers and recognized Richard's name from old mechanic circles. "Heard you were one of the best before life got rough," Tom said during their first meeting at the shop, a bustling space filled with a familiar scent of oil and metal. He offered Richard a supervisor role, overseeing a team of younger technicians, with a starting salary that included benefits. "No pressure to jump in blind. We'll train you up on the new tech." Richard accepted with quiet gratitude, his first day marked by a mix of nerves and excitement. Training scenes unfolded over the following weeks. Mornings spent shadowing Tom on diagnostic software, learning interfaces that scanned engine codes with precision he had only dreamed of in his previous life. Afternoons involved hands-on sessions, guiding apprentices through brake replacements and transmission flushes, his steady hands demonstrating techniques honed by experience. "Easy now, torque it just right," he instructed one young mechanic, his voice patient as they worked under a lifted sedan. Progress came swiftly. By the end of the month, Richard led his first full shift, troubleshooting a complex electrical issue on a hybrid vehicle, his confidence growing with each successful repair. The role provided structure, a rhythm that anchored his days and rebuilt his sense of purpose. Parallel to his professional resurgence, Richard committed to personal healing through clinic counseling, addressing the addiction that had shadowed him for years. The donations covered sessions at a community health center specializing in recovery, where he met with Dr. Elena Ramirez, a name that stirred poignant memories of his late wife. Their first meeting was in a cozy office lined with motivational posters, Dr. Ramirez outlining a tailored plan. "We'll start with cognitive behavioral therapy to rewire those triggers," she explained, detailing steps like identifying high-risk situations and building coping strategies. Sessions delved deep. One focused on journaling past relapses, Richard recounting the funeral night with raw honesty, tears flowing as he processed the grief anew. Another incorporated mindfulness exercises, guided meditations to manage cravings, progressing to role-playing scenarios where he practiced refusing a drink at imagined social gatherings. Group meetings followed, where he shared his story among peers, finding solidarity in their nods and shared experiences. "It's one day at a time," he told the circle during a breakthrough session, his voice stronger. Milestones marked advancement. 30 days sober celebrated with a certificate, then 60, each accompanied by homework like building a support network. The clinic's holistic approach included nutritional counseling and exercise plans, Richard joining walks in the park that cleared his mind and strengthened his body. Through it all, his humility shone in dialogues with Dr. Ramirez. "I don't deserve this chance," he confessed once, to which she replied, "Everyone deserves recovery. You're earning it every step." Housing came next, a tangible symbol of stability gifted through the campaign's funds. A modest one-bedroom apartment in a quiet complex, complete with a small balcony overlooking green space, was secure rent-free for the first year via a donor's real estate connection. Moving day was a community affair, volunteers helping carry boxes of donated furnishings, a plush sofa, kitchenware, and bedding that smelled of fresh laundry. New clothes arrived in care packages, practical outfits like jeans, shirts, and sturdy boots that fit properly, replacing his worn rags. A local salon offered a makeover, the stylist trimming his tangled hair into a neat cut and shaping his beard with care. "You clean up nice," she teased gently, as Richard stared at his reflection, scarcely recognizing the revitalized man gazing back. "Feels like a dream," he murmured, touching his smooth chin. Yet adjusting to this new life brought mild thrills of paranoia, echoes from the past threats lingering like faint whispers. Nighttime walks home from the garage sometimes quickened his pulse, a rustle in the bushes evoking memories of shadowed followers. One evening, a car idling too long nearby sent him hurrying inside, heart racing as he double-checked locks. Old habits, he confided to Tom during a lunch break, explaining the arrests, but admitting the fear's persistence. Support proved the antidote, overcoming these moments through forged bonds. The garage crew became a surrogate family, inviting him to barbecues where non-alcoholic toasts celebrated his milestones. Dr. Ramirez adjusted sessions to address the anxiety, incorporating relaxation techniques that ease the tension. Community members reached out too, their encouragement a buffer against isolation. Grateful beyond words, Richard began thanking helpers personally, a deliberate effort that deepened connections. He visited the activist who started the campaign, presenting a handwritten note. "Your faith in me changed everything." Coffee meetings with donors followed, dialogues filled with humility. "I was just a guy down on his luck," he told one couple who had given generously. "Your kindness, it's overwhelming." These interactions blossomed into friendships, like with a retired teacher who mentored him on budgeting the funds wisely. Bonds strengthened at the clinic too, where he volunteered to speak at newcomer orientations, his story inspiring others. "If I can turn it around, so can you," he shared, his presence a living testament. As weeks turned to months, these waves of generosity reshaped Richard's world, setting the stage for the reunion he yearned for most. With stability in place, he gathered old addresses and phone numbers, drafting letters to Lily and Sophia. "I've made changes," he wrote in one, his pen steady. "I'd love to see you if you're open." Sending them off brought a mix of hope and apprehension, the envelopes carrying the weight of lost years. Responses trickled in slowly, a tentative email from Lily first, hinting at possibility. The chapter of renewal felt incomplete without them, but the foundation was laid, ready for the emotional tides ahead. The chapter of renewal felt incomplete without them, but the foundation was laid, ready for the emotional tides ahead. Weeks after sending those tentative letters, Richard's apartment buzzer sounded on a crisp Saturday morning, pulling him from his routine of brewing coffee and reviewing work schedules. He approached the intercom with a mix of hope and trepidation, his finger hovering before pressing the button. "Hello," he said, his voice tentative. "Dad? It's Lily and Sophia." The words crackled through the speaker, simple yet seismic, shattering the quiet of his new life. His heart skipped, a surge of emotions flooding him. Joy, fear, disbelief. He buzzed them up, pacing the small living room until a knock echoed at the door. Opening it revealed his daughters, grown into women he barely recognized yet knew instantly. Lily, now 29, stood tall with Elena's bright eyes and a cascade of dark hair, her hand resting protectively on a subtle swell at her midsection. Sophia, 27, shared his own features more sharply, her expression a blend of caution and warmth, carrying a bouquet of flowers that filled the air with sweetness. "Come in, please," Richard managed, stepping aside as they entered, the space suddenly alive with their presence. The reunion unfolded in the sunlit kitchen, where he had set out mismatched mugs from donations. They hugged awkwardly at first, bodies stiff from years apart, but the contact broke barriers, tears flowing freely. "I'm so sorry," Richard began, his voice thick. "For everything. The drinking, the absence. I let grief swallow me, and you paid the price." Lily nodded, wiping her eyes. "We saw the news, Dad. The gold, your story. It made us realize how much we've missed." Sophia added, "Aunt Margaret kept us away, said you were unstable. We were kids, influenced by her stories of blame. But we're independent now. Lily's a graphic designer. I'm in engineering." We cut ties with that toxicity years ago. Their explanations poured out over coffee, painting a picture of manipulated youth. Relatives whispering doubts, controlling visits, fostering resentment to justify custody. We believed them at first, Lily confessed. But as we grew, we questioned. Your letters, they were the push we needed. The conversation deepened, apologies weaving with revelations. Richard shared his side fully, the crushing medical bills after Elena's illness, the spiral into addiction, the street years that tested but preserved his core. I fought to get better, but by then, you were gone. Sophia reached across the table, her hand on his. We forgive you, Dad. Mom's death broke us all. We should have reached out sooner. In that exchange, past hurts began to mend, words acting as sutures for old wounds. Lily revealed her pregnancy then, a quiet announcement that lit the room. You're going to be a grandfather, she said, smiling through tears. Due in 4 months. It's a boy. Richard's eyes widened. A grandfather. The word carried redemption, a chance to nurture where he had faltered. Discussions turned to the child, names inspired by Elena, and how Richard could be involved, resolving fears of repeating cycles through open promises. Family bonding ignited from there, extending beyond the apartment. That afternoon, they shared a meal at a nearby diner, a simple spread of burgers and fries that felt like feasts from their old backyard barbecues. Laughter returned tentatively, stories of Lily's art exhibits and Sophia's gadget inventions filling the gaps. Richard listened hungrily, absorbing their lives, offering anecdotes from his garage days that sparked recognition. You taught me to fix that bike chain, Sophia recalled, her eyes bright. The next day, they ventured to a park, walking paths where Richard pointed out birds and shared mechanic trivia, rebuilding connections step by step. He met extended kin soon after, Lily's husband, a kind architect named Alex, who shook his hand firmly. Heard a lot about you lately, Alex said with a grin. The good parts. Sophia's partner, a teacher named Mia, joined for a group dinner, her warmth easing any lingering awkwardness. These gatherings fostered unity, share recipes evoking Elena's chili, photos exchanged to bridge the lost years. Yet amid the joy, a thrilling element of brief fear surfaced, a shadow of rejection that tested Richard's resolve. As plans solidified for more visits, doubts crept in during quiet nights. What if they saw his scars too clearly, the remnants of his past surfacing to push them away? One evening, after a call where Sophia hesitated on details, paranoia gripped him, echoing the threats of before. He paced, imagining withdrawal, his mind conjuring worst-case scenarios of doors closing forever. But the next meeting dispelled it, their embrace pure and unreserved, redemption washing over him like sunlight. We're here for good, Lily assured, her hand on his shoulder. The fear, brief and unfounded, only heightened the sweetness of acceptance, proving his growth. With family ties strengthening, Richard threw himself into work, excelling in ways that surprised even him. At the garage, his supervisor role blossomed, mentoring becoming his forte. He guided a young apprentice named Jamal through a tricky engine rebuild, demonstrating valve adjustments with precision. Patience is key, he advised, echoing his father's words, as Jamal's hands steadied under his watch. Another day, he led a team on a fleet maintenance contract, diagnosing fuel system issues efficiently, earning praise from Tom. You're a natural leader, Tom noted during a review, promoting him to handle night shifts. Examples of his prowess multiplied, resolving a persistent electrical fault on a luxury sedan that had stumped others, or training the crew on hybrid tech, his knowledge updated through online courses funded by donations. The job not only provided income but purpose, colleagues becoming friends who celebrated his sobriety milestones with cake in the break room. Half the donations, a substantial sum nearing $350,000, were channeled into a shelter program, Richard's way of paying forward the kindness. Planning unfolded meticulously with community leaders, starting with meetings at the health center. I want to fund expansions, he proposed, outlining details, renovating an adjacent building for more beds, adding counseling rooms equipped with therapy tools, and hiring staff for addiction support. Budgets were drafted, allocating funds for vocational training workshops, mechanics classes he volunteered to teach, and meal programs sourcing local produce. Legal consultations ensured transparency, with an oversight committee tracking expenditures. The program launched with a ribbon cutting, Richard speaking humbly. "This is for those still out there, like I was." Impact showed quickly. Increased capacity housed dozens more, success stories emerging of individuals finding jobs and homes. His involvement deepened bonds, volunteers from his new circle joining efforts, closing loops of gratitude. All emotional arcs converged in this mending, wounds from Elena's loss, the family's fracture, and Richard's descent finding closure. Nights now held peace, reflections on progress rather than regret. With Lily's due date approaching, plans for a nursery visit symbolized fresh starts, Sophia's engineering projects inspiring collaborative tinkering in his garage. The gold's discovery, once a solitary gleam, had rippled into a tapestry of healing, integrity's reward manifesting in restored relationships and communal good. Richard stood taller, his life a testament to second chances, the broken bonds not just mended but fortified for whatever came next. Richard stood taller, his life a testament to second chances, the broken bonds not just mended but fortified for whatever came next. Months passed in a steady rhythm, each day layering new strengths upon the old. By spring's arrival, Richard marked 6 months of sobriety, a milestone celebrated quietly with his daughters over a home-cooked meal in his apartment. The cravings that once haunted him had dulled to whispers, managed through daily routines. Morning jogs along the river path, evening journal entries reflecting on gratitude, and weekly check-ins at the clinic where Dr. Ramirez noted his progress with approving nods. "You're not just maintaining," she said during one session, reviewing his logs. "You're thriving." The transformation extended to his physical self. The lines on his face softened, his frame filled out with nutritious meals, and his steps carried purpose rather than weariness. At the garage, Richard's role had evolved into something indispensable. No longer just supervising, he had taken on training oversight, developing a program for entry-level mechanics that blended technical skills with life lessons. Thriving in this environment, he led workshops on advanced diagnostics, using real-world examples like overhauling a vintage truck's carburetor system, his explanations clear and engaging. "It's about understanding the why behind the what," he told a group of trainees one afternoon, diagrams spread across the workbench. His excellence shone in metrics. The shop's efficiency ratings climbed 15% under his guidance, customer satisfaction surveys praising the team's precision. Tom promoted him to assistant manager, entrusting him with inventory and scheduling. "You've got the instinct," Tom remarked during a staff meeting. "And the heart." Richard's days buzzed with activity, from mentoring a struggling apprentice through a complex wiring repair to negotiating supplier deals that saved costs. The job was more than employment. It was reclamation. Each wrench turned a step away from the streets. The shelter program, seeded with half the donations, launched in full bloom that same spring, its impact rippling through the community like the gold's initial gleam. Housed in the renovated building adjacent to the original shelter, it offered comprehensive support tailored to those Richard once walked among. Specifics of its help painted a vivid picture of change. Within the first 3 months, it aided over 50 individuals with vocational training, including mechanics courses Richard taught twice weekly, where participants rebuilt engines from scrap, gaining certifications that opened job doors. Health services expanded too, with on-site nurses providing checkups and addiction counseling, helping 30 enrollees achieve initial sobriety milestones through group therapy modeled after Richard's own path. One success story stood out. A young woman named Carla, who arrived malnourished and withdrawn, completed the training and landed a position at a local auto shop, her testimonial at the launch event bringing tears. "This place gave me tools, not just for cars but for life," she said. The program's budget, meticulously managed, allocated funds for emergency housing stipends and mental health workshops, ensuring holistic aid. Richard volunteered evenings, sharing meals and stories, his presence a beacon that encouraged others. "If I could climb out, so can you," he often repeated, his words fostering hope amid the structured chaos of recovery. The town itself transformed in tandem, inspired by Richard's story into broader systemic shifts. Official programs expanded, the mayor's office announcing a new initiative modeled after the shelter's success, a citywide partnership for homeless reintegration, funded partly by grants attracted through media attention on Richard. Businesses stepped up, hiring from the program's graduates with incentives like tax breaks for inclusive employment. Examples abounded. A coffee chain trained and employed 5 former homeless as baristas, their stories featured in promotional materials. A construction firm partnered for apprenticeships, placing 10 in paid roles learning trades like plumbing and electrical work. Local restaurants donated surplus food weekly, reducing waste while bolstering the shelter's kitchen. Community events amplified this, like a fundraiser fair where booths highlighted success stories, raising additional funds. Richard witnessed these changes on his commutes, seeing familiar faces from the streets now in uniforms, waving as they passed. The shift fostered a collective pride, conversations in diners turning to themes of compassion over judgment, the town's fabric woven tighter with threads of empathy. Personal growth for Richard manifested in unexpected avenues, particularly through talks at schools where he shared messages on character. Invited by a local high school principal who had followed his journey, he spoke to assemblies, his narrative captivating young audiences. Integrity isn't about grand gestures, he told a group of juniors one morning, standing at the podium in a crisp shirt. It's the small choices, like returning what's not yours, that build who you are. He wove in anecdotes from his life, the Gold's temptation, the street's trials, emphasizing resilience and honesty. Questions followed, students probing his regrets and triumphs, his responses humble and insightful. Pain shapes us, but it doesn't define us, he answered one query on loss. These engagements extended to middle schools and community centers, his schedule filling with requests. Each talk reinforced his own healing, reflections afterward noting how articulating his path solidified it. Messages on character became his mantra, echoed in letters to his daughters and notes to trainees, fostering a legacy beyond the material. Yet even in this era of stability, a final thrill emerged, one last confrontation tied to the heist's lingering threads. It came unexpectedly on a warm evening as Richard walked home from a school talk, a figure approaching peacefully under the streetlights. The man, in his 40s with a lined face and hesitant gait, introduced himself as Elias, nephew of one of the original thieves, the one who had died in the shootout. "I saw your story," Elias said, hands raised in non-threat. "My family, we've carried that shadow." Richard tensed, echoes of past paranoia flickering, but the man's demeanor invited dialogue rather than danger. They sat on a nearby bench, Elias sharing his side. Raised in the aftermath, tempted by tales of hidden wealth, he had considered reclaiming it aggressively, but paused upon learning of Richard's honesty. "Thought about threats, like my cousins did," he admitted. "But your choice, it hit me." Richard listened, then spoke from the heart, convincing Elias of integrity's power. "That gold brought ruin to your kin," he said gently. "Letting go freed me. It can free you too." Their conversations stretched into the night, Richard drawing parallels to his own reform, emphasizing second chances. Elias nodded, resolve forming. "You're right. Time to build something better." Weeks later, Elias turned himself in for minor past offenses, entering rehab and later joining the shelter program as a participant, his reform a quiet victory. The encounter, thrilling in its potential for conflict but resolved peacefully, closed the criminal subplot definitively, no loose ends lingering. All threads of Richard's journey wove to resolution, subplots converging in harmony. Family closeness deepened, weekly dinners becoming tradition, Lily and Sophia integrating him into their lives seamlessly. With granddaughter Emma's impending birth, Lily's sonogram confirming a girl, named for Elena's middle name, the excitement built, Richard helping assemble the nursery with hand-built shelves, his mechanical skills shining. "She'll know her grandpa's story," Lily said, hugging him. Sophia's wedding plans included him walking her down the aisle, a role he accepted with tears. The shelter thrived, job flourishing, town evolving, each element a testament to integrity's ripple. Richard, once adrift, now anchored, looked to the future with quiet assurance, his transformation complete, impacting not just his world, but those around him in enduring ways. Richard, once adrift, now anchored, looked to the future with quiet assurance, his transformation complete, impacting not just his world, but those around him in enduring ways. 4 years slipped by like pages in a well-loved book, each chapter building on the last, turning the unexpected gleam of that fateful discovery into an enduring light. Now at 56, Richard embodied health and vitality, his body toned from regular hikes and gym sessions at the community center, his mind sharp from ongoing learning and mentorship. The scars of the past remained, faint lines on his face telling stories of resilience, but they no longer defined him. Instead, they accentuated the warmth in his smile, the steady gaze that spoke of peace earned through trial. The pinnacle of this era arrived with Emma's birth, a moment that crystallized his journey. Lily had gone into labor on a balmy summer evening, the hospital room filled with the soft beeps of monitors and the hushed anticipation of family. Richard paced the waiting area with Sophia and their partners, his hands clasped in quiet prayer, memories of Elena's final days mingling with hope for the new life. When the nurse emerged with a grin, ushering them in, Richard's steps quickened. There, in the dimly lit room, Lily held her newborn daughter, tiny and perfect, wrapped in a soft blanket. "Meet Emma," Lily whispered, her eyes shining as she passed the bundle to Richard. He cradled her gently, his large hands careful, as if holding the most fragile treasure. Emma's eyes, dark and curious, met his, and in that instant, a vow formed in his heart. "Little one," he murmured, voice thick with emotion, "I'll teach you what my parents taught me, what life hammered home. Integrity isn't just a word, it's the compass that guides us through storms. I'll show you how to hold it close, no matter what." The family gathered around, Sophia's hand on his shoulder, Alex capturing the scene on his phone, Mia wiping tears. It was a scene of pure connection, the cycle of life affirming his return, with Emma's first cries echoing like a promise of continuity. In the quiet aftermath, as the family settled into routines with the newborn, Richard found himself drawn to reflections that wove the past into the present. Evenings often found him on his apartment balcony, gazing at the stars scattered across the night sky like distant jewels. The vastness above mirrored the expanse of his thoughts, prompting introspection on the path traveled. One such night, with Emma's photo on his phone as a screensaver, he recalled the abandoned house, the gold's allure, and the pivotal choice that altered everything. What if I'd kept it? He pondered aloud to the stars, the question rhetorical now, answered by the life surrounding him. The decision had been a turning point, not for material gain, but for reclaiming his essence. Inside, on his nightstand, sat a framed photo of Elena, her laughter frozen in time from a happier era. He would sit with it sometimes, tracing her features, affirming his return to the man she had loved. "I found my way back, love," he whispered, the words a bridge across years. These moments of solitude balanced the bustle of days, grounding him in gratitude, reinforcing that true healing came from within, a gradual unfolding like dawn chasing away shadows. His legacy extended far beyond personal spheres, manifesting in the shelter program's profound reach. What began as a local initiative had helped hundreds, its framework a blueprint for compassion. Over the 4 years, it assisted 450 individuals directly, with tailored programs that addressed root causes of homelessness. Vocational training expanded to include not just mechanics, but culinary arts and IT skills, graduating 200 participants into stable jobs. Stories like Marcus, a former addict who now ran his own food truck, crediting Richard's workshops for his turnaround. Health services treated over 300, with addiction recovery rates at 65%, bolstered by peer-led groups where alumni shared triumphs. The program's success inspired nationwide replication, A nonprofit network adopted its model, establishing similar centers in 5 states, from urban hubs in California to rural outposts in Texas. Details of this expansion included federal grants secured through advocacy, training manuals co-authored by Richard distributed to affiliates, and annual conferences where he keynote, drawing crowds eager for insights. Start with one act of kindness, he advised at one event in Chicago, and watch it multiply. Media followed the growth, documentaries featuring the shelter's impact, with Richard's story as the narrative thread. Communities rallied, volunteer numbers swelling to 150 locally, businesses sponsoring scholarships for graduates. This ripple effect transformed not just lives but systems, policy changes advocating for integrated support services gaining traction in legislatures, all tracing back to that single honest act. Final talks in schools and centers echoed this theme, honor positioned as an unshakable anchor in turbulent seas. Richard's presentations evolved, incorporating Emma's birth as a poignant close, illustrating how integrity sustained through generations. It's the quiet voice that says do right when no one's looking, he told a rapt audience at a university commencement, his words resonating with graduates facing uncertain futures. These echoes carried into family discussions, around dinner tables where he shared parables from his life, Lily and Sophia nodding in agreement, passing the wisdom to Emma as she grew. In mentorship at the garage, he wove it into daily lessons, advising trainees on ethical dilemmas like overcharging clients. Honor keeps you steady, he emphasized, his own stability a living example. As the years solidified these foundations, the overarching lesson crystallized, tying all strands without loose ends. The greatest treasure lay not in gold or accolades, but in the internal spirit that fueled them. Richard's journey underscored that wealth was fleeting, but the spark of goodness within, nurtured through choices, reflections, and connections, endured eternally. This truth uplifted those around him, a beacon for the shelter's residents, his family, and the broader community. In quiet moments, he marveled at the irony. The hidden stash that could have chained him instead unlocked freedom. Life, once a series of losses, now brimmed with abundance, themes of redemption, compassion, and integrity reinforced in every facet. Emma's laughter, the shelter's bustling halls, the town's evolving empathy, all testaments to a spirit reclaimed. Richard embraced this legacy, his heart full, knowing the true treasure shone brightest from within, illuminating paths for others long after his steps faded.